last slide, we're going to be talking about bias, and as I just was telling you off screen, they're always looking for the best answer. Not necessarily just the correct answer, the best answer. So there may be multiple correct answers, especially in multiple choice. Pick the best. So when you're surveying, there is a problem called bias. And that's when you take a sample, and that sample could show favoritism. There are 4 causes of bias that we talk about in our class. One kind of bias is called undercoverage. That's when the groups are left out of the process when you're choosing the sample. The wording there is not so nice. The second kind is a non-response. This is where groups are chosen for sampling and they choose not to cooperate or cannot be contacted. For example, if they were to call to take a survey at 2 p.m. in the afternoon and they want to know what your income level was, who are they leaving out? Yep, everybody who's at work. So that would not be such a good sample. The next kind is something called response bias. That's where you give incorrect answers. So like if you're a very strong conservative person and they talk about something like what's the facts on this, and you answer based on your beliefs, but it might not be an actual fact, then that would be a response bias. And then the last kind is the wording of the question. So if the wording is confusing, like how many people don't want to not show up to school? Yeah. Exactly. So that is the wording of the question. The question sucks, it's confusing, people might answer incorrectly because the wording is poor. Okay, so in the next paragraph, there's an important AP tip. If you're asked to describe how the design of the study leads to bias, you're expected to identify the direction of the bias. Suppose you're asked, explain how using a convenience sample of students in your stats class to estimate the proportion of all high school students who own a graphing calculator would result in bias. You could respond, the sample would include a much higher proportion with a graphing calculator than the population because the graphing calculator is required for this class. That is, this method would lead to an overestimate of the actual population proportion that own this calculator. And then we'll be done. So in each of these following sample designs, we're going to describe how the design leads to a bias. Number 1, in a survey about how often people go out to eat, interviewers call people at home during the hours of 5 to 7. 15% of the people state that they go out to eat at least twice a week. What kind of bias do you think this is?
Non-responsive.
Or not responsive. Undercoverage.
The best answer, as we've talked about before, is going to be undercoverage.
Yeah.
The best answer. Not that the other ones are wrong. The best answer. This is undercoverage. Why? Well, first of all, this sample would have a much lower proportion of people that go out to eat at least twice a week. And it would lead to an underestimate of the true proportion. Okay, so number 1, very frustrating. Number 2, a university sent out a survey to find out how the alumni felt about the usefulness of their education. The results were overwhelmingly positive. 83% who responded felt their education was useful. What do you think this one is?
Undercover. Non-responsive.
Fantastic, you guys. It is going to be non-response. Yeah, I know.
There's none of them.
Okay, so non-response. First of all, this survey would probably have a higher proportion of students that felt their education was useful. Or this would cause, I guess, an overestimate rather than an underestimate. So one of the things that they ask you for usually on tests and stuff like that is do you think it's an overestimate or an underestimate? So this one would be an under and this one would be an over. And, sorry. In the next one, at the end of a final exam, a professor asks the students to answer the questions concerning his teaching ability. Right now, I don't think my survey would go well. 93% of the students wrote that he was an excellent teacher. Response bias. For sure, response bias. So, what color do we use for that? Purple. So this one is response bias.
Just to irritate everyone.
Okay, all right. All right, so in this one, this sample would have a higher proportion of students that say he's excellent. Probably because they want a good grade. So if we're looking at what's going on here, this one has a higher proportion. Probably, I'll just write that down, probably because the question was on an exam. So the higher part means, of course, this is an overestimate of actually how good he is. So this last one, in question number 4, a survey is about fast food restaurants, and students were asked whether or not they agreed or disagreed with this following statement. Due to the inveterate and intransient behavior of a segment of the school population, students should not be allowed on the premises of eating establishments after 7 p.m. 72% of the student body agreed.
Right.
Okay, so first of all, for me, my biggest question would be, how many kids do you think knew inveterate and intransient? Very few. So this one would for sure.
Yes.
The answer is yes, I agree. So this one's the wording of the question.
Some people know.
So in this particular example, this would have a higher proportion than expected. And I would say probably due to the lack of knowing the definition of the words that are highlighted in yellow.
Yeah.